Hello everyone, this is part 13 of What If Naruto Was the Blue Uchiha, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
It was raining in a megacore. Raincoats and waterproof underwear were in style this season. Uno Moriyoko laughed to himself at his own little joke, then his eyes dipped and his brow furrowed at his mind's instinctive attempt at making jokes to alleviate his mood. He circled his arms around his legs and wedged his chin onto his knees, closing his eyes and breathing out dully, focusing on the sensation of the downpour showering on him and the heavy rumble of powerful chakra through the black clouds hovering over hidden rain. Talking to his stepmother had worked as well as he thought it would. He snorted at his joke, ducking his temple onto his knees. Making jokes at the table didn't seem to make her like him any more than she already did, of which her personal opinion of him was belted out for their whole building to hear. Inviting her, and the rest of their family, over for dinner was an amazing idea. Dry feet crunched over the perpetually wet roofing tiles of his Uno's apartment complex, steadily coming towards him on feet that the younger boy hoped didn't slip. Rain in Am could be heavy on one day and light the other. This was an in-between day leaning towards the heavy. The 15-year-old boy turned his head to the side at the sound, his brilliant yellow eyes tracked his older brother as the boy carefully trudged to him. Uno's 17-year-old brother had pale skin and light pink hair matted down by the rain, his colorless eyes lit up when he finally plopped down next to his younger brother, ribbing him with a wide smirk. Could have been worse, lil bro. He adjusted his brown raincoat under him. Uno grunted. I do the jokes. 'Cause you're so damn funny, huh? Obi scoffed, making Uno roll his eyes. The albino's grin lowered into a half-hearted look of both compassionately understanding while still reprimanding. He made to speak but the boy, glancing at him, spoke first. Don't look at me that. You could have met her in the middle, is all I'm trying to say. Obi placated hesitantly. Tell that to her. Uno shot fired back snappily. Why do you think I bothered to invite you guys for dinner that I made? He sat up, hugging his legs closer and shrugged weakly. I'm just tired of Dad's wife. Our new mom. Obi corrected, knowing exactly what was coming. You're awfully quick to accept her. Dad loves her, apparently, so I'm trying to see what he sees in her. Maybe that's why she gets along with you better. The 15-year-old Amjenin pulled the hood of his gray rain poncho further over his head, hiding his deep frown. The 17-year-old albino chuckled, scratching his chin. She just feels sorry for me. Not this again. The younger boy groaned, frustrated. You're here to cheer me up, not the other way round. This is my last night in Am and I thought I could have one decent meal with that woman, and here you come with your problems. The civilian scratched the back of his head, tittering at his younger brother's perceptiveness. He jabbed his elbow into Uno's side, ribbing him again. Come on, lil bro, laugh at my pain. It's way better than wallowing in yours. Tonight's for celebrating, man. He smiled kindly, asking. So, where'd Lady Conan post you? Snow Country. That's where Dad's wife was posted to when she was on active duty. The pale boy joked. Ooh, lucky. Am ninjas, when they were deemed suitably trained, were sent out of the village to infiltrate villages or nations and impersonate their shinobi as a test of their previous training in hidden rain. Once they received a callback notice from the Amekage Tower, or better yet Lord Amekage's spokesperson, Lady Conan, then they would defect immediately and return home to spread the knowledge they had acquired during their stay in the foreign settlement. Acquiring secrets from lands that not that many people of the area weren't privy to was a specialty of Am ninjas, and this was proven by their stockpiled catalogue of information accessible in their village library or at request from the Amekage Tower. Ninjas of the rain were masters of seamlessly blending in with the crowd, to the extent that they had been energetically running around the continent since a while after the Second War and no country had been able to pick up on it. You could have been luckier if you chose to be a ninja. Uno suggested uselessly, understanding that it was too late for his older brother to become a ninja but still holding out hope that the other boy would come around. How many albino shinobi do you know? Ha, lil bro. Looking up, a name and a face came into the Genin's head. Off the top of my head, Naruto Uchiha. The guy they call Blue. Dude, really? Obi questioned disbelievingly. Konoha's undead sniper. It's a recessive gene, but, from what I read in the library like, a year ago, I think, his pupils tremble before they activated into the Sharingan and when he was thinking really hard, like involuntary rapid eye movement. The medical report had been stolen from Orochimaru's abandoned lab on the night she fled Konoha, using the noise and the distraction of the Leaf Shinobi giving chase to the wanted Kunoichi to break into the medical stronghold inside the Forest of Death. It wasn't the first report they found, but it was the most interesting, as the genius Uchiha was secretive enough as it was. It didn't say what parent had the gene, or identify his mother, though the reality was that Orochimaru was the one that passed down the gene to him while Blue's father's Uchiha bloodline dominated. They assumed, as the scientist had a short summary of his medical report, that she had in turn stolen that or built that information over time. The woman might have conducted a myriad of experiments and tests on herself, adding Kekkei Genkai to her body, extending the total length of her life and the compounding events that shaped her body, remaking her genetics. The Uchiha bloodline, though, was a naturally dominant gene. That was the best explanation Am and Orochimaru could think of for the sniper having blue irises and black blonde hair, while the Uchiha famously had coal black or deep brown and the Sannin had golden-colored reptilian iris. Much like the rest of the continent, Blue was an anomaly. He was friendly, sociable and fluent, but he was also pitiless, remorseless and merciless, often towards enemies of his or risky strangers. Overall, he was quiet. He was careful. Blue was dangerous. The simple fact that he was alive when proven dead by the Yondaime Hokage was worrying. Minato Namikaze was a friend of the Amekage and his origami angel, reportedly, and that they shared a bond by being students of the late Toad Sage, a man they publicly and privately disconnected themselves from. The Amekage and Konan's reasons for lending their support in containing the Blue Uchiha came from that weak connection they had via the man the two high-ranking Akatsuki members despised. The albino from Am shook his head. This is the best life for me. Am is the perfect place for me to live. I honestly feel sorry for anyone like me that lives in Suna. He winced, screwing his lips to the side. Naruto Uchiha doesn't count. Say what you want, I don't care anymore. I'm leaving for Snow tomorrow. Or, you're not even going to lecture me about loving myself and being more adventurous. Shove it. Where? The 15-year-old turned green, aghast at the verbal return, and his older brother burst out laughing. Screw you. Obi chuckled and slapped Uno's back genially. As Dad's favorite child, the younger sibling rolled his eyes. I'm telling you to chill out every once in a while. There's no point letting our stepmom rile you up. You're the shinobi of the family. Technically, you've made it. No pressure. Uno mumbled sarcastically. The 17-year-old civilian slapped his brother upside the head, saying, What I'm saying is that could be why stepmom doesn't like you. 'Cause you can do all those crazy jutsus and us humans have to make do with walking the earth like chumps. Dad retired as a genin and stepmoms can't use chakra anymore. You've got it made, lil bro. This brings us back to you becoming a ninja. Obi exclaimed, rubbing the back of his head with a sour pout. You could be doing way more with yourself. I'm happy where I am. I've got an okay job at the Amekage Tower, an awesome girlfriend and a nice little place of ours close to work. Sure. Uno stopped as he spotted a small speck off in the distance in the general direction of closed-off Am's eastern route connected to Fire Country, some 100 yards or so. He unsealed a pair of binoculars from inside his raincoat and fixed it over his eyes, furrowing his brow at who he saw approaching the village hidden in the rain at such an easy pace. Is that the guy they called Blue? He was holding a featureless gray-black umbrella over his head, deflecting the pelting rain down on him as well as nearly merging with the dour horizon of the rain village. The black-blonde man tightened his hold of the umbrella ever so slightly in his red-gloved hands, using his other hand to recheck an odd forearm-length contraption attached to both of his forearms by secure leather straps, tapping on the metallic surface of those identical forearm contraptions with a pointer and middle finger that glowed with ghostly blue chakra, switching the umbrella to his other hand to do the same with the other machine on his other forearm. Blue ran a hand through his hair and pushed his circular black glasses back up his nose, hiding his unseeing milky white eyes, making progressive headway to a megacure. The man was in a dark short-sleeved shirt and black shinobi pants with bandages tied around his sandaled feet. His shuriken and kunai pouches were noticeably on each of his thighs, and those two red holsters faced outwards. Information on the identity of the Konoha-affiliated sniper that had brought down so many high-profile personalities during the Third War came out to be the Blue Uchiha, mysteriously leaking from the Hokage's office a short while after the Uchiha's supposed demise at the Yondaim's hands. Bingo books containing Blue's information shifted to accommodate this reality, increasing his rank from a safe C rank to begrudging A rank, not passing into S or double S rank territory because those villagers assumed that the long-distance favoring Uchiha did not qualify for that infamous honor. The leak from Konoha had called him a genius, yes, but Kumo, Waterfall and Stone, the places he was wanted, did not want to admit that the long-range specialist that mostly refused direct confrontation was any sort of feasible threat. No one wanted to give him credit that him hiding his abilities and convincing the planet that he was of C-rank skill was testament to his capabilities as a shinobi. That wasn't important now though. Not long after Uno had picked out the blue sniper did the village lit up in alarm at the solitary man's steady arrival. This wasn't because they visibly saw him as a threat but because it was impossible for anyone to enter the rain and get close enough to the village like this without being detected a mile or so outside of the chakra rain. Even now, the rain could barely detect him. Blue had effectually cancelled out his own chakra. A small smirk played on the corners of the blue sniper's lips. He came to a stop 20 yards before the entrance of the village and relaxed his hold on his umbrella, allowing it to fall onto his shoulder and yet still block the brunt of the rain. The gates of the village swung open and the master of crows looked a little to his right, raptly listening to the hard pitter-patter of rain bouncing off his umbrella and the subtle crunch of blazing feet surround him from the back. The blue Uchiha hummed to himself, knitting his brow in thought. His shoulders lifted and dropped with feigned resignation, as if he didn't have an option anymore. All right. Blue walked into Am. The gates slammed shut with an unsettling bang. Hidden rain was still. The massive iron and glass structures of the heavily industrialized rattled silently in the rain and the tarred black road the blind man tread crunched quietly underfoot. No steam-powered carriages tramped down the street. No person could be seen and the stark silence heightened the storming noise of the downpour. His feet directed him deeper into the village. Then he got to the Amekage Tower and though the double doors of the front entrance flew open, soundlessly inviting him inside. On the other side of that door was a wall of blackness, an utter void of sightless nothing. Blue couldn't see but he could sense. Instead of entering though, Blue stood outside a stone throw away from the door, sensing the person lying in wait to rip him into shreds. He tipped his head back and his sensory abilities stretched far up the building, along the gleaming glass and the rigid metal. Blue opened his mouth and shouted, "Nagato!" His voice reverberated through the village, ebbing and thrumming with subdued power. "I know you can hear me." The man held out his right hand, his unoccupied hand, and flexed his fingers, pushing them into his pocket and leaning back dispassionately. "I know you can see me." Blue's mouth dipped into a frown and his eyes narrowed. "Come out." There was a pause in the air for an entire minute, filled with nothing but the staggering rain and the reminiscent echo of the powerful Uchiha's bellow. Kisame Hoshigaki came out of the double-door entrance of the tower and it automatically slammed shut behind him, audibly locking once with a firm click. The blue-skinned shark man wore a wide grin, standing there, and the bandaged mass on his back warbled with muted excitement, chattering with the muffled enthusiasm of a stalking tiger waiting to sink its teeth in its prey. Kisame's purposely non-waterproof Akatsuki robes let the water pouring down from the sky soak quickly, but that wasn't a problem for him, water was his element. Kisame casually approached Blue, crossing his heavily muscled arms and towering over the black-blonde Uchiha. The air shifted and Am ninjas materialized around them, perched on the roofs of smaller buildings, seamlessly emerging out of the darkness of alleyways, ducking out from behind walls and surrounding the pair at a relatively safe distance. Blue stopped counting after 300. His head craned back and his black-shaded blind eyes met Kisame's blue with black sclera orbs. Kisame's chest rumbled. "Nuibari warned me not to fight you." Referring to the wielder of the needle sword by the name of her sword, seeing as she didn't provide her name to any of her comrades when they were still a unit, Naga was merely a name Blue had assigned to her, one she accepted. Kisame's fingers creaked. She said, "You were under her protection." He laughed deeply, grinning harder. "Can you believe that?" Blue's eyes closed and he smiled serenely. "I do, actually." Nuibari, or Naga, was ranked third strongest in the Swordsmen of the Mist, underneath Kisame and the holder of the twin swords Kiba, and she used this superiority in spite of being a missing ninja to communicate with her former comrades. "Stay away from the blue Uchiha. Never liked that chick." The holder of Samehada proclaimed, shrugging. She's too quiet. He shook his head. I'm not a fan of quiet people, they have too many secrets. His grin remained, but his eyes glared downwards at the unaffected man. Do you know what's going to happen now, Uchiha Naruto? Blue raised an eyebrow. I don't know. Why don't you tell me? I'm going to peel off your skin bit by bit, inch by inch, and send it to Nuibari. Then I'm going to tear off your arms and your legs, give them to Samehada, and I'll leave the rest of you to Lord Pain. His grimly gleeful expression hardened. He won't mind. Lord Pain only wants you dead. And you're confident you can finish the job. Blue took 5 steps back, a whisper of a smile lingered on his face as he closed his umbrella, stabbing the pointed end into the tarred ground and beaming somewhat when Kissam's menacing look briefly flickered as his umbrella stood erect in the solidly tarred path, having broken through the ground and leaving a small spider web of cracks in its wake. The Uchiha let go of the grip, scratching his cheek with his gloved right hand. Well. Kissam only laughed, unslinging Samehada from his back. Blue's next words weren't for the zero-tailed beast. They were for the Amekage. If I have to slaughter this whole village before I get to you, or you have the guts to come to me, I don't mind. He smiled lopsidedly, taking his left hand out of his pocket and rubbing his hands together. I don't mind at all. He cracked his knuckles and the sound rocked through the hidden village. You can't hide behind them forever, Nagato. Blue flared his chakra. Doom. Heat from the underworld reverberated out of his form, reaching far and wide before hastily retreating back into its teeming controller and leaving the air as if it had never happened. Harsh chills ran down the spines of all that felt the baleful wrath of the wrongfully ranked Blue Uchiha, gritting their teeth and taking an involuntary step back at the short-lived overbearing pressure on their souls. Despite not feeling the heat any longer, they noticed that the rain sizzled and evaporated half an inch from Blue's body. A twisted smirk crawled up Naruto's face, malevolently settling under his ominously shaded eyes. Kissam swallowed, his body tingling. His apprehension only made him more excited. Exhilaration overruled caution. Let's do this. Kissam roared and ran to his blind opponent, hefting Samehada up and swinging it diagonally downwards as he closed the gap. Blue's answer was a decisive, all right. In the flicker, the blind man was in a low stance. His knees bent and his left hand a foot and a half from the ground while his right hovered over the kunai pouch in his right thigh. His milky white eyes flickered actively under his black shades, absorbing the barrage of sensory information pouring into his head, drawing for him an exact mental image of the village hidden in the rain as well as the shark man blazing in his direction, bringing the bandaged weapon closer and closer to his head as it followed through its downward arc. Kissam's Konoha bingo book entry rolled through his head, coupled with previous knowledge of Blue's experience as a hunter ninja. Naruto blinked. He knew what to do. He yanked out a kunai from the holster and dove to the right, dodging the blunt smash from Kissam's sword, tucking in a roll and switching the grip of his blade into a reverse hold, spinning to the left as the Kiri missing ninja swung after him. He slammed his foot into the side of the weapon while it followed that sideways path, adding more force than Kissam intended and threw his kunai with a flick of his wrist, as the heavily muscled swordsman fought against turning in a full circle on the spot. Naruto's blade sunk into his stomach with a wet plop and summarily came out on the other side as the ex-mist ninja returned his body back from its water form. Samehada frilled open at Kissam's mental command, wearing a triumphant grin that the Uchiha wasn't the one to make the first tag, and he swept it back around to Blue, this time manipulating the sentient weapon to enlarge and elongate. Then he noticed the ninja wire tied to Blue's middle finger, connected to the kunai that he had dodged. His heavy weapon couldn't meet the undead sniper any quicker. Blue meshed his fingers together and flipped through 10 hand seals, ending in rat. Lightning release, live wire. White energy blazed angrily from his clasped fingers, shooting into Kissam's stomach in a blinding flash of light. Tertst. Muscles tightened, skin hardened, heart hammered and his brain fizzled as thousands of volts coursed through the shark man's body, toppling him onto his knees and painfully tightening his grip around his sword's handle as the muscles of his fingers constricted forcefully. Standing a safe distance away and wrapping his hand around the wire that electrocuted the former Kiri ninja to the brink of blacking out, Blue frowned. You can't be serious. He increased the voltage and Kissam's kneeling form coated with the terrible white electricity, hotly enough for vapor to waft off him and his mouth to fall open in a silent bellow of agony. The Uchiha gave a terrible yank, ripping the kunai from Kissam's gut and releasing the man from the treacherous hold of the B-rank lightning jutsu. He caught the knife and observed the dull drip of blood from the base to the tip, quirking a curious brow at the blue-skinned man as he fell forward onto his hands, panting for dear life and sucking as much chakra from Samehada, somehow still in his grasp. A small smile flicked up his face. By any chance, he wondered slowly, spinning the bloody kunai in his hand and tilting his head to the side, observing Kisum once again as the man staggered to his feet, visibly fighting the effects of surviving an electrocution, battling to regain control of his rankling heart and blinking away the dark spots in his vision. Shadows loomed over his face, glowering with festering insanity at the man that had put him down so quickly, and blue couldn't glow any brighter. Did I use too much chakra? Intentional. Yes. It wasn't only about using too much chakra for that ordinary, admittedly, Uchiha lightning jutsu. It was about blue using his chakra. Want to try Ag-O? He crossed his forearms and encountered Kisum's blatant blow head-on, gritting his teeth in a growing grin and shoving the bigger man back, sliding under a roundhouse kick and backflipping over Samehada, landing on his hands and pushing off the ground when the living sword changed direction and dive-bombed him, shattering the tarred earth. The sniper twirled the blood-soaked weapon in his hand and pushed his shades up his nose. He wordlessly spectated as the shark man panted tightly, exhaling through his clenched teeth. Each breath dragged into his haggard lungs was a battle, and the uncontrollable tremors of the muscle fibers of his arms and torso threw his focus all over the place, but rather than retreating and coming back stronger, the man settled in his preferred fighting stance. Opening his legs at shoulder width with a barely visible bend of his knees, perched the scaly handle of a madly frilled-out Samehada on his shoulder and gripping his heart with his left hand, closing his eyes in sheer suffering. He ripped off his Akatsuki robe and carelessly let it drop from his hand, displaying his bare, broad chest and the defined muscles of his torso. He wore only a pair of black shinobi pants. The gills of his neck shuddered, whistling a little. Blue eyebrows slithered up his forehead as the man clenched his left fist, the one over his heart, and uncurled it into a half-ram seal. Oh. Water release, great exploding water colliding wave. Blue sucked in air and held his breath. Kisum opened his mouth and a typhoon exploded out, surging rapidly and drowning a good 300 meters of the village underwater, reaching so high that it covered the roof of the massive Amekage's tower. Naruto fixed his feet to the ground with his chakra, battling against the surging water and narrowing his eyes as the shark man snapped his jaw shut, ending the rapidly formed flood. The drainage system of the hidden rain village struggled to handle the water, and the shinobi of the village that had been unable to escape the water grasped within their shinobi vests, their raincoats or their rain ponchos, retrieving oxygen masks and snapping them over their mouths, reclaiming their ability to breathe. Those ninjas floated warily in the water, keeping away from the man that had formed the flood. The village that had centuries of technological breakthroughs that made them adept at living in constant rain automatically widened the drains, though a split second later they were closed shut, erecting fortified mechanical walls from slots on the ground to contain the large body of water exactly 200 meters from Kisum. The blue Uchiha hummed, so Nagato still didn't want to show himself. Samehada coiled around its wielder, its teeth chattering insistently as it merged with Kisum, making them one. The man's blue skin darkened to grayish blue, a large fin ripped out from his spine and two more deadly fins tore from the back of his arms. 3 longer, thicker and more defined gills extended on both sides of his neck, the same for the 3 lines under his eyes. His fingers and toes became webbed and the nails sharpened. Finally, a 7-foot-long tail shot out from his tailbone, swaying side to side. The kunai wound close to his diaphragm closed, and the throbbing pain resided as the shark man fully combined with his weapon. Kisum hunched forward and his fingers blazed through 3 seals. Water prison shark dance technique. The flood of water stilled and gathered closer, forming a giant dome of water with the shark man at its epicenter, gently swirling inwards, though the other man inside the specialized water prison, Naruto, could not be budged from his spot, standing with one hand in his pocket and the other gripping the kunai that had forced Kisum to his knees in his other hand. The umbrella Naruto had stabbed into the tarred ground was also contained in the dome of water. The blue Uchiha was leaned back casually, soundlessly observing. The dome of water was a terrifyingly large chakra-made structure, he admitted, holding his breath. His black shades lightly slipped off his face and he allowed it to fall, subtly pulled inwards to the menacing Kiri-missing ninja. His milky white eyes squinted and he stashed his kunai back into the pouch. Blue couldn't use blades longer than a tanto, not really. They weren't his specialty and he left them for Yugao to master. Even having a dojutsu that could copy most kind of jutsu, taijutsu to genjutsu, ninjutsu to kenjutsu, he hadn't bothered to focus his attention of kenjutsu. Weapons like the katana or a longsword went against his long-distance specialization, and now of all times he could perceive a few slit-like weak points on Kisam's unbreakable shark form that a longer blade could fit through. So he used the next best thing. Brute force. Kisam's feet left the ground and he floated in place, wearing an ill-omened grin. Blue's back stiffened and he straightened up, bringing his feet together and having his right hand bend behind his back while his left was held out, palm flat and facing up. Strong fist. Mike Guy would be proud. A bubble escaped a corner of Blue's lips and his teeming excitement at the uncertainty of what was going to happen next bubbled up his gut, lighting up his unseeing eyes. Kisum swam to his blue opponent in a blast of air and water and Naruto met his fist with an open palm. Devastation ensued. Ooh. Sooner or later, you will have to face him yourself. Zetsu warbled, speaking with two voices, one light and airy while the other was deep and foreboding. The plant man was partially formed, seeping out from the shadow of the Amekige's mechanical throne, somehow unaffected by the dozens of chakra rods driven into the skeletal redhead. The hidden, subterranean headquarters of the Akatsuki rumbled with the ensuing battle occurring above ground, as well as with the grating breaths escaping the dying god's mouth. Zetsu blinked when they didn't get a response, carefully saying, "He is a force outside of nature, his will happen, na gato." The man's purple, ringed eyes glowered at nothing in particular, dipped down and widened at the realization. Why did you get involved? The two-faced creature questioned suddenly. Madara and I advised you to leave the yellow flash to his devices. Why didn't you listen? Everyone was either dead or going to die. Blue had even unknowingly taken away a prospective member, hidden, years before the S-rank organization regained its footing in the criminal underworld of the continent. Itachi, for that matter, the Blue Uchiha's own nephew, had a role to play in the organization in the near future. It had all now gone to hell. Figuratively and literally. Against its base mental functionalities, the will of Kaguya Otsutsuki worried for Konan, the origami angel. Ripping through the void of space and into the distant nothingness of eternity in a chunk of rock that resembled a paper moon, the woman was still very well alive, Zetsu knew. Another part of Zetsu wondered if they could have ever predicted Naruto's entering into deityhood. That was the one thing Zetsu had not manipulated. Orochimaru's gene-altering search for knowledge and immortality after the death of her parents, yes, and even her subsequent impregnation by that Uchiha filth whose wife, Mikoto's mother, had fled from during the confusion of the war. Pregnant at 17, Zetsu had predicted the prideful, infamously bloodthirsty and maliciously hateful Snake Sannin would abort the child. Terminating the pregnancy would reshape the Sannin's psyche, turning her more so into the realms of darkness than could be logically possible. Daily, the woman would mourn the hole she had created in her soul by her own hand by killing the child formerly growing her in belly, increasing her regret for surviving the bandit ambush that took her parents away from her. She would balefully detest the dead baby's father for putting her in such a position, previously forcing her to choose between her ninja career and prospective motherhood. Orochimaru would also hate herself for her snappish decision to killing that life in particular. The culmination of all of this would lead her to being an active part of the Uchiha massacre, escaping the village when her crimes were brought to light and making her way to Akatsuki in a bid to dull the torturous pang in her soul by burying herself in her intensified search for universal knowledge. That didn't happen. Orochimaru kept the child. Albeit, the baby was a stillborn. Zetsu felt hope that it would end like that, for there was a chance his manipulations of her life would reach the same conclusion, but the grieving snake lady compounded her knowledge to bring Naruto back to life. Guilt at possibly condemning Naruto to a life as a messenger of death, a crow pulled her away from her child, trusting him to his father, though Zetsu's projections shattered once more when the mother sought after her child as he prepared to leave for the warfront. She loved the child, apparently. Not only was Naruto the child of the most knowledgeable Sannin, he was also a genius. His meteoric progress couldn't be stifled, not by his family, not by the war, not by the Yondaime, and certainly not by death. The blue-eyed Uchiha was an existence Zetsu hadn't planned on, a divergent pathway in the greater scheme of things. Naruto's second death though opened a way for their mistress to escape her lunar prison, as long as Zetsu played their cards right. It was drastic and they had been putting that back door to Kaguya's escape off for years, but now it seemed that if they didn't act quickly, their chance would slip through their fingers and it would take another handful of millennia to find their way back again, though what was to say the Blue Uchiha would stop that when the time came. Minato Namikaze was likely Zetsu's last hope at completing his one mission. This is over. Akatsuki, world peace, everything. Have a nice Nagato, whatever's left of it. The two-faced creature melded into the earth, leaving Nagato alone. Ooh. With Kisum and Blue. The shark man's fist connected a jaw-jostling right hook and the blue sniper dug his knuckles under his opponent's chin, delivering a jarring left uppercut. The vibrations and sounds dulled by the dome of water understated the severity of each tagged blow. Blue brought his fist back and blocked a rising knee with both of his hands, pushing it down and snapping his left forearm against another right hook, shoving it back and returned with an elbow of his own, which Kisum ducked and slammed two fists into Blue's gut, quick and hard, though unready for a knee strike that nailed him on his temple, propelling him against his own current and shooting upwards. He shook off the daze and blasted down to his blind opponent, baring his teeth and reaching for Blue's face with the claws of his right hand. Naruto shifted his head aside and used his hands to continue the direction of the grab, snagging Kisum's upper arm and wrist, flipping him over his shoulder and bashing the shark man into the ground with a deathly muddled crash. Kisum burst out of Blue's grip with a beating swirl of his tail, batting it strongly against the sniper's low forearms. The blow pushed Blue back a few feet in that underwater dome. He dropped his forearm guard and immediately thrust his knuckles into the face of a water shark, swimming a step aside and bashing his fist into the side of another manifested shark. His lips became a terse straight line as one-tailed beast didn't summon sharks made of water but actual shark summons. They swam at him in a frenzied school of serrated teeth and ravenously snapping jaws. His red-gloved fists cracked audibly. Bump bump bu bump bb bump. His right foot dispelled a shark, spiraling around and batting away two more with one single, hard spin, sliding beneath a snap for his neck and grabbing the fish by his tail, swinging it against another and bringing it down on the ground, dispelling it as well. His face came up and he thrust his fist forward, shooting straight through the mouth of a shark and charging chakra up his arm, blasting the poor summons to pieces in a burst of blood and water. The resulting spike of heat from the expelled chakra evaporated a good dozen sharks spearing down at him. Kisum snarled and ripped through the water, braving the curdling heat in Blue's immediate vicinity and burying his right fist in the Uchiha's gut, rearing back as Naruto pushed his gut out and smashing his left knuckles across Blue's face, sweeping around and driving a foot into Naruto's lower back, though barely missing and having to dash away from a sharp grab for his collar. Manipulating the water dome and his quick reflexes were what kept him away from Blue, and that burned the ex-Kiri ninja. Blue stomped his right foot on the ground and lowered his center of gravity, spreading open his arms and facing his head in Kisum's general position. The muscles of his legs geared up and his upper body hardened. There was a hard thud and a hammerhead shark twice as large as its summoner whirled out into existence, charging headfirst down at the underworld. Naruto's feet left the ground long before the creature had the time to open its serrated, driving his shoulder into hammerhead and tearing straight through in a glorious display of blood and guts, blazing a crunching straight fist into Kisum's readily raised guard. Hovering there, both of them, and holding that fatal position for what felt like hours, the spectating ninjas held their breaths. The sequence to come was so fast, steam bubbled from around the two ninjas. Blue smashed a knee to his chest with his elbow, jabbing Kisum's ribs and yanking his arm back as the forearm fin very nearly shred his arm off. Passing his head under a right hook and delivering another jab to the other side of Kisum's rib, grunting with grit teeth and leaning far back as the shark man ran the deadly sharp arm fin at his face, having to complete a full mid-water backflip and catching a straight punch aimed at his nose with his left hand, twisting it down and pulling towards himself, ramming his elbow into Kisum's jaw with a resounding bang. He hastily released the fist in his hold and shifted back a little, batting away some 10 ballistic blows with his arms and flipping back once more as a round kick came around for his head, clenching his teeth as he righted himself when the shark man found a lethally sharp fin swiping horizontally across his gut. Blood ebbed from Naruto's abdomen and the merged creature Kisum had become couldn't be more elated. He raced down and his clawed left hand came for the slice. Crack. Blue's knee flashed up, banging mercilessly against Kisum's jaw. For half a second, Kisum saw nothing but blackness. His neck violently snapped back, hard enough for the back of his head to thump against the fin on his back, and he lost feeling of his limbs. Inside his head, Same had squealed and spun his tail, powering away from the Uchiha as the sniper very nearly grabbed its wielder by the throat. The sentient sword broke open a section of locked-up chakra and forced it into the shark man, vibrating in a vague semblance of relief as the lolling neck of his wielder snapped back in place and Kisum wiggled his fingers, thankful to have feeling in him once more. Not a second later, Kisum blasted down to Blue, who was knitting his gut closed, sealing up the cut with his chakra and allowing that to heal his wound. The blind Uchiha set that aside for a moment and lifted his left arm, guiding the clawed strike away from his face and shooting a brazen fist at Kisum's unprotected chest. Crack. Ack. Blood rushed out of the shark man's mouth and he planted both feet on Naruto's gut, hastily pushing away. He gasped for air, even as his gills sapped the water around him of oxygen, and his clawed hand clenched the place Blue's fist had impacted. The area directly over his heart smoked thinly, displaying a well-defined fist. Kisum closed his eyes in agony, searching for more healing chakra and clenching his teeth as Samehada battled to fix the damage. His heartbeat was erratic and his lungs trembled. Yuck. Grr. Blue hadn't used chakra for that. Strong fist on its own, in the hands of a well-versed practicer, could break bones with even one good, solid strike. Kisum's burly chest and his thick skin could withstand such an attack only so much. His eyes ringed with his own blood and more of his life-sustaining liquid escaped his mouth. The rattling of his heart subsided as his sword healed him, but the imprint remained, oozing wispy smoke. This was the second time in some minutes the Blue Uchiha had pushed him close to the brink of death. His nails dug into the imprint and he bellowed, releasing a torrent of ferocious air bubbles from his saw-toothed jaws. "You're dead, Uchiha." Quote. Thum. Half a foot from his target, he was stopped in his tracks as Blue swept around him, cracking his knuckles against the shoulder of the arm, grabbing the fist imprint, destroying the bones there and shredding the muscles. The arm descended from its socket loosely, only kept connected to his body by his skin. He never imagined himself entering shock, yet here he was, eyes bugged out in horror as he saw his arm hanging bonelessly at his side. His senses blared and a deathly shadow loomed over him. He spun around, putting his hope into a right hook. Snap. Blue's fist connected with his own in a retorting right hook and the effects came immediately after. Kisum's fingers shattered, released of their joints. The shockwave of the blow flowed up his arm, loosening and snapping the muscles of that arm in a ripple of air, breaking his ulnar and radius during its unstoppable movement, rolling the elbow out of orbit and smashing the humerus straight into his clavicle. The path of devastation ended with Kisum's collarbone, the bone of his upper arm was crushed into, breaking in half and one half jutted out of his body for all to see. Kisum's right arm was now 6 inches shorter than before. The man's shock locked him in place, unable to conceive how he had gotten to that point. His day had started normal enough. He woke up in his sleeping quarters inside the Emekage Tower, flirted with the ever-impassive Conan and ended up smacking Deidara into a wall when the mad bomber howled at his failed attempt at getting the origami angel into his bed. Kisum left the village for a short, solo mission in water country, letting loose and slaughtering the guards of the water daimyo's niece. He caught up with the girl and let Samehada feast on her, then he came back to Am and planned out the rest of his day of relaxation. Getting called by pain and being told to prepare for battle was unexpected but not unwelcome. And it was Naruto, Blue, Uchiha. The person Nuibari boldly, disrespectfully warned him to stay clear of. All the better. Now, Blue was shaking his right fist, floating in the water Kisum had manifested and screwing his lips to the side. The knuckles of his red gloves were worn off and the knuckles themselves were bruised, smoking ever so subtly. He rubbed the sore fist and winced. Ow. His milky white eyes lit up as he heard the low groans of the injured shark man. His senses told him that Samehada was struggling to heal the intricate and multiple injuries he had dealt out. He couldn't hold his breath any longer, might as well end the fight. With one shoulder dislocated and another arm battered beyond reasonable recovery, Kisum could only swim backwards as Blue charged at him, but 2 pairs of ghostly hands on each of his arms kept him firmly in place as well as 2 more pairs gripping his ankles. In a panic, Kisum looked at who was restraining him and met the tickling smiles of 4 copies of the Blue Uchiha. Water clones. This was an execution. Blue's bruised fist met Kisum's heart. Thump. The shark man's back, specifically the place his heart was located, swelled exponentially. Ribs snapped and gave way, lungs deflated and the man's diaphragm burst as the arteries and veins connected to Kisum's heart tore off, all happening at once in a span of a nanosecond. Bam. Kisum's back exploded outwards and his heart blasted out, shooting out and bouncing off the front entrance of the Emekage Tower. Blood and viscera poured out of the hole in the former Akatsuki member's back, dyeing the water red, and almost immediately did that happen did the structural integrity of the water dome fall. Soaked in Kisum's blood, Blue swam to the gasping man and hefted him up by his neck, swimming up and squatting on the surface of the water while the dying man was almost completely submerged. Rain pelted down on him, washing through his black blonde hair and draining the other man's blood from his form. The Uchiha didn't speak, staring wordlessly with his unseeing white eyes into the dimming orbs of the ex-Akatsuki shinobi. Huck. Kisame exhaled harshly, weakly flailing in the slack grip around his neck. He grabbed Naruto's wrist, feeling Samehada's presence recede so that the claws of his fingers retracted. The hulking mass of a man was left alone as the purple sword ebbed from his gut, fleeing for dear life and hunkering a safe distance away from the silent sniper, who remained over the water with his chakra. Betrayed, Kisame panted, holding his right hand out to where Samehada had fled to. Sam, or. Blue scoffed and finally allowed Kisame's torture soul to leave his body, claiming that demented soul for his own and savoring in the wails of agony as the dead swordsman descended into the abyss. A short distance away, Kisame's heart plopped back to the surface. Naruto let go of the corpse's neck and Samehada zipped past, swallowing its former holder whole and disappearing a moment later. It went to mourn. There we go, Blue muttered, standing up and looking out over sea of bloodied water. The clean cut on his stomach was sewn up, though it leaked his blood only a little. He ran his fingers through his hair and blinked, bending down and picking up his dark shades as they floated on the water. He snapped them over his blind eyes and scratched his chin. This water was starting to become troublesome. He clapped his hands together and his umbrella, underwater and stabbed into the tarred ground, flapped open. Rat, dog, summoning jutsu, fuinjutsu, seal gateway to the boiling void. The seals lined in the interior of his umbrella glowed red and the water swirled into them, forming an aggressively ear-splitting whirlpool. Shinobi balancing on the water ran up walls and perched on buildings, chilled to the core as 200 meters of the contained flood, enough to submerge the Amekage Tower, was sucked into the umbrella. Naruto was on the surface of the water, close to the middle of the vortex of water, and he didn't look bothered by the whirlpool. He rolled his right shoulder carefully, keeping his left hand there and grimacing imperceptibly, an irritated twitch on his brow and his right hand was clenched tersely. He had drawn those seals himself, forming a direct path into hell for his crow summons to escape from the moment he called. He suspected that the rain would interfere with his ability to call his crows out from the abyss, so he prepared ahead of time. He picked up how to draw those miniature seals during his stay in Uchiha, partly learning how they worked and then using his link to the god tree to absorb the knowledge from one of his older crows. The seal couldn't suck living beings into hell, especially humans, though it was adept as exhaling creatures from the depths of hell, even as it had never been used until that moment. Like pouring water over flames that could not be quenched. A sea of fire that no flood could stifle. It almost tickled. That wasn't the problem though. The crow summoning scroll came directly from the god tree. A substantial amount of tree bark fell from the ancient, godly tree and the contract for the messengers of death manifested on their own, naturally. Him being of the Uchiha bloodline meant he was privy to certain exceptional abilities and knowledge, albeit he couldn't access half of them as of yet. He was blind with half a soul after all. Blue was powerful as it was. With a well of chakra that couldn't logically be depleted, an immunity to several nature transformations, incomparable physical strength and spiritual fortitude that was added on top of the one he trained into himself when he was a normal human, the right to use a galaxy of jutsus, knowledge of the most intimate secrets of creation, existence, deities and the universe, unquestioned command over the Shinigami, the subservience of the crows and resurrecting the dead at will. He didn't have ungodly regeneration though. Blue did have his natural regeneration from when he was completely alive and he had a toughened body that made it immensely difficult to wound, but that was it. He couldn't absorb chakra from the living and in turn he couldn't perform healing arts for his chakra was toxic to the touch. Threading the muscles and skin tissue of the cut on his stomach with his chakra and using that same chakra to hold them together while his regeneration painstakingly weaved his back flesh together was all he could do at the moment. Naruto's time in Uchiha, relearning how to walk and taking off into a realm of his own from there, was great and all but it raised some concerns. His fight with Jiraiya informed him of the galaxy of possibilities for him in his current state, while the one with Kisame warned him of his limitations. Holding his breath was fine, he could do so for 5 minutes, 7 if he wasn't moving, but when it got to the point he could no longer hold his breath he rigorously forced his chakra to squeeze the carbon dioxide molecules in his lungs of oxygen, repeating this process over and over again until he finally put the shark man down. Orochimaru always told him that there was always an easier way of doing things. Burning Am to cinders with hellfire was as easy as they come. Hellfire was much like Amaterasu, likely hotter and more voracious. And Blue would keep telling her the same thing. The easier things were, the less value they held and the less satisfaction once accomplished. Besides, he didn't need to see into the future to know that something big was going to happen, outside of him murdering Minato and the Yondaim's flock of friends. The easy route was the lazy route, and the lazy route wasn't meant to be used all the time. Blue inhaled and exhaled tightly, feeling the water level drop and his feet land with a gentle crunch on the ground as he released the chakra coating his feet. The umbrella ceased sucking in water when it got to Naruto's lower calves, and he gnashed his teeth, narrowing his eyes at the ninjas staring down at him, shocked to silence at the gruesome nature in which he had executed the zero-tailed beast, as well as the ease at which he had siphoned the flood through his umbrella, which was now billowing with thick steam, piling high into the Am sky in spite of the chakra-heavy rain. Darkness lined the inside of the umbrella and a festering heat pulsed from it as well, though it couldn't compare to the imposing figure of the underworld. With a now visible twitch of his brow, Blue pushed his left fist into his pocket and scratched his cheek with his bruised right hand. What are you all waiting for, Am Shinobi? The steam billowing from the umbrella thinned ever so slightly, and Blue lowered his face, throwing a shadow over his upper face as his unruly black blonde hair shaded his shaded, white eyes from view. The water around his calves swished with deceptive serenity, lapping against the legs of the foreboding Uchiha. Water harmlessly dripped from the twins, strapped to his forearms. The heavy downpour did nothing to muffle his low words, as all of Omegacore heard him loud and clear. You run or you die. Aerial drones and CCTV cameras gave the viewers in their respective bomb shelters and underground bunkers a good look at him, including everything that had transpired from the moment he marched into Hidden Rain to the very second Kisam's unbeating heart floated to the surface of the once mighty flood. Civilians and genin alike cowered in terror, hugging their loved ones for what felt like the last time. The news station and police force of Am had been ordered to broadcast the events live and in real time in all locations, and all means of receiving news, television screens, radios, computers and phones. The village collectively flinched away as a murderous smirk crawled up the clearly unfazed man's face, making his dark shades glint and the Uchiha's transformed serrated teeth visible to the people of Am. Blue roared, driving the fear of Kami into their hearts and minds. Choose now. The falling rain and the subtle hiss of steam from the umbrella filled the silence, choking the resolve of the Tokubutsu Junin and Chunin ordered to come and defend their village. In their vast numbers and on home soil, they felt their courage waver. This person was not human. Not anymore. Their hesitation and the Amekige's refusal to show his face pissed him off. A large number of them knew this man. Naruto Uchiha. The guy they called Blue. They also read his record, perusing through the vague documents written on the man by two types of people, Konoha comrades, of which made up a larger number of the records, and unfortunate survivors of the Blue Ones massacre, who were stifled from making their knowledge public by the Sandaime Hokage when the old Sarutobi was still cage. The death of Iruka Umino and the Kumo ambush that injured Yugao Azuki stood firmly at the forefront of those documents, surpassing in importance the speculation of his mother's identity or his unproven involvement in the Snake Sannin's escape from Hidden Leaf. No. His anger stuck at the front. Blue stopped being human when he was pissed off. And presently he was pissed off. Some 100 of them turned tail and ran. And were instantly cut down before they could take 2 steps. Cowering civilians and fearful genin were heartbroken at the live reel of their precious friends and relatives losing their will to fight and then getting their throats slit by those closest to them the moment they turned to flee, dying a coward's death. Uno Morioko pulled his kunai out from the chest of a comrade with a wet shick. A baby-faced Chunin comrade had been promoted alongside him some weeks ago, cleaning the blood on his pants thigh. He straightened up and used his foot to nudge the vainly heaving boy over the edge of the printing press they were on, watching dully as the stabbed boy broke his spine as he landed back first on the marble statue of a book. A tear crept down his eye, dripping from his nose. His first kill. Weakness was not tolerated in Omegacore. Live for Am, die for Am. There was no other way. There was no going back now. He looked up and his fist shot into the air, clenching the blade he used to finish off his gutless comrade. For Lord Nagato. Hearing the Chunin boys hail, the fires in their hearts flickered with life, glowing hollowly in acceptance. For Lord Nagato. Their war cries rocked the village hidden in the rain to its very core. Those that remained chose to die. Ooh. Fire country capital. Spindly fingers clacked noisily across a keyboard and a pair of owlishly large eyes slithered across the glowing screen of a computer. Those large eyes tracked the words he was typing and the bearer muttered under his breath, tittering once at the flimsy firewall protecting Fire Country's global news broadcasting station, a TV and radio service that broadcasted even to unallied airwaves. Colors flew over the unhealthily pale shut in hacking into the vital nerve of the country's information dissemination network. Orochimaru perched herself on a windowsill, her golden reptilian eyes looked out into the warm night of the capital and twirling a dreadlock with her index finger. The dark-skinned Sannin flicked her eyes into the pitch-black room, fixed on the haunting face of the hacker as he exclaimed with glee. I've done it, Orochimaru-sensei. I've posted everything online and by breakfast tomorrow, the video footage will stream for however long you want. He spoke in a raspy whisper, hoarse from disuse and feeble from lack of speaking with other humans aside from his teacher. The whole world will watch. Would Konoha's hackers find a way around it and take it down? The man scoffed breathily. I doubt it. Parasite. The woman hissed his assigned name, her luminous eyes bearing down on the recoiling hacker. No, Orochimaru-sensei. I swear. Blue was at a crucial juncture in his plan. Minato was in financial ruins. Most of his investments were up in flames, and seeing as the Yondaime had his name stamped clearly and visibly over all the things he was involved in besides illegal trades, the other investors noticed the trail of breadcrumbs quite literally put out by the blue Uchiha that whatever Minato Namikaze was involved in was destined to burn. The trading value of Minato's assets dropped. The fall was so hard it was causing ripples in the financial world, for there were 9 steady investors that basically had their fingers dipped in every single known asset class, thereby owning a large portion of anything they bought into. 2 of whom were multi-billionaires, the man from Chill Blue and Minato Namikaze. The assets Minato owned that lost their value were referred to as irredeemable. While Blue had been sniping down 3S ranks some time ago, he had assigned functions to ninjas of Orochimaru's village, utilizing the Sannin as a representative on his behalf. Like the night before his death, when he initially planned to space out how he was going to put his affairs in order and ultimately powering through the arduous affair in one night, the blue sniper sensed that he needed to hasten along his plan or an unexpected interference like the dying god's involvement would disrupt him once more. Yugito saw to it that the rumors of Minato's financial fall and the proof of it was promptly spread, and it was a well-known fact that information in their world was not just a precious commodity but also traveled faster than lips could move. The holder of the Nibi no Nekomata was teleported across the continent via crow summons and with a few stealthy whispers here and there into the ears and presence of affluent people that were affiliated with the 9 billionaires, there was no stopping the verbal fire that raced over their world. The rich took the words of the beautiful lady seriously, what with Yugito's brazen forwardness and seductive charm, though she had to be under a henge so that the rakeage, didn't find out of her association with the man that had scarred his younger brother, Kiribi. Orochimaru's function, while her son went and dealt with the dying god, was to oversee the start of the second part of his plan. Minato was in monetary shambles. His wealth had been taken away from him, next was his golden reputation. Already, online news updates tingled over the globe and the night owls of the continent shared the carefully written report concerning the Yondaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, going back and forth over the scarily accurate proof of Minato's criminality. By sunrise the next day, the news would have spread too far to be contained. Ooh. Omegakure no Sato. Raincoats fluttered and hushed footfalls splashed on the surface of the water amid the thundering bellow of the chakra cloudburst. Blue took a stance. Descending chaos whirlpool fist. His expression hardened and his cloudy white eyes narrowed. Years of training and instinct took over. Blue grabbed a fist honed for his face and twisted it around. Kicking the owner's knee into the ground and smashed his elbow into his face, spinning around and nailing his elbow into the jaw of an unfortunate kunoichi, sliding under a sword stroke and jamming his fingers into the person's windpipe, stepping back from a straight kick for his gut and cracking his fist into the knee, splitting it in a chilling angle and finishing the wailing sufferer off with a spinning kick of his own. His center of gravity lowered and he rammed his fist into the stomach of a hammer-wielding ninja, sweeping their feet and following through with that sweeping motion to clear 5 more ninjas off their feet, flipping backwards and mashing his hands into 5 hand signs. In midair, he held the tiger sign under his lips and breathed in. Fire release, great fireball technique. The roaring blizzard of dark red flames pouring from his lips cooked the fallen shinobi to ash, baking some and forcing others to erect mud walls to deflect the fatal flames, lapping against their walls and their willpower with its weighted heat. Blue landed in a crouch and rolled forward, away from an earth-splitting axe kick, rising quickly and smacking a right hook down with his left palm, jamming his elbow into the ribs of someone else that had gotten too close, crashing his knuckles into the person that had formerly tried to punch him, moved his head away from a kunai stab to his temple, tore a backhand across the face of the man whose ribs he had fractured, spun on his heel and nailed a hook kick into the jaw of a female ninja at his back, grabbed the head-jarred ninja he had been laying waste to and brought it down to his right knee. Crunch. Naruto breathed out tightly. The sniper whirled on his feet and grunted as his right forearm barely blocked a flying kick, pushing the attack back and stepping on a shinobi's foot when the man came at him with ropes. Naruto's hands snagged two blades from their holster and he ripped a clean cut across the rope holder's throat, Spartan kicking the breathless man into a small crowd of comrades. Returning to the moment, a blade went over his shoulder, blocking a katana strike and the other used the flat side to block a daggered stab for his side. He released hold of his kunai and bent down, spinning at the same time and reclaiming both knives though with hands different than before. His wrist snapped and the two blades impaled their target's calf and upper arm respectively. He used the back of his hand to hold against a left hook and ducked an overhead kick, intentionally having the latter attacker to meet the former in a grisly collision. In his low position, he blurred through 15 seals, slamming his hands down on the ground and murmuring, "Earth release, Kraken of the murky underworld." Tentacles made from mud and bloody muck broke out from the tarred ground around him, speared through the stomachs of 10 ninjas falling down from the sky on him, hardening into hooks and dragging them to the earth. Boom. Pieces of the tarred earth exploded on impact, leaving behind dead ninjas that had large holes in their torsos and gaping pits from where the mud kraken had shortly broken free. The blue Uchiha crossed his forearms and flicked his wrists. A handful of shuriken fanned out in each of his hands and he threw them in front of him. Banging and clanging against the other, they bent inwards and peppered a squad of ninjas gearing up to restrain him with seals, though as soon as he released the ninja stars from his grip he spun around and faced his mid-range launchers at those at his back, flipping their hands together in preparation for a jutsu. Chew 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 chew. 3 needles cracked into the temple of a kunoiki as she got to her second to last seal and a fourth senbon reeled her back to the master of crows via a ninja wire threaded to the end of the last senbon. He maneuvered her as she flew to him, bypassing the reaching hands of the ninjas she soared through. He caught her and whirled her around, holding her upright by the back of her neck and pointing her at her comrades. Eyes rolled up into her skull and slack-jawed, her fingers flicked to the last seal and he allowed her soul to descend into the pits of hell, uttering her jutsu on her behalf. A Junin roared, overcoming his surprise. Take cover. Water release, summer Gatling gun. The calf-height water bubbled treacherously and what happened next could only be described as the shallow water fighting the rain. Millions of hardened water senbon blasted up into the heavens, shredding any ninja that hadn't been swift enough to follow orders and take cover, reducing them into a mess of flesh and bloody strips. The man that had ordered the dead woman in blue's hold to begin forming the jutsu howled in agony as his left leg was caught a split second before he ducked into a bakery, having to smash through the door with his shoulder. It wasn't a widespread jutsu, not with the amount of chakra she intended to use, as it would specifically manifest from under the blue sniper's feet and flay him alive, though now that it was in his control it encompassed 50 full meters of water. Soon after the inverted hailstorm began, Blue released the woman's neck and she crumpled onto her knees, toppling backwards in a boneless slump. He made to step on her face and launch himself forward at a bravely approaching squadron of Chunin, though a merciless punch smashed into his face from his left. Blue's head whiplashed along the direction of the blow, sending his shades off his face. Uno's eyes enlarged, stunned that he had been able to make that last-ditch tag. Air vacated the raining battlefield and the ninjas gaped, frozen on the spot at the achievement of one of their own. This paralyzed moment lasted 5 seconds. Blue's face snapped back to the boy and he was grinning. His translucent white eyes were wide with murderously maniacal excitement. The 15-year-old Chunin tripped back as the man nearly grabbed his face in his gloved hand, stumbling onto his butt and rolling to the side when the man crashed his fist on his former position, destroying the ground. Uno scampered to the right, almost even running on his hands and feet, crying out as a senbon impaled his left heel deep enough to crack out from the ball of his foot. "Gyah, where are you going, kid?" Blue lumbered over to him, his daggered grin widened impossibly from ear to ear and his blind eyes curved up. He casually turned a kunai in his palm. You chose to die, didn't you? The man leisurely reloaded his launchers, grunting with displeasure when a shinobi appeared between him and his target in a swirl of wind, swinging a kunai at Blue's neck. The Uchiha leaned back, narrowly missing the slice for his throat with just a whisper, shooting an uppercut and dislocating the man's jaw on contact, sweeping his legs out from underneath him at the same time and punting his head clean off his neck. He turned around and buried a foot into the gut of another man, sending the man back and giving Blue space to slap away a four-fingered strike to his shoulder, returning the favor by stabbing his fingers into the attacker's eyes, curling them in the man's skull and swinging the screaming shinobi around, using him as a meat shield against a volley of shuriken. Ninja stars peppered the back of the pained man, slicing and cutting into flesh and bone before the shinobi realized their mistake and stilled their hands. Blue waited, steadying his breath and forcing his expression to a simmering calm. He held out the now dead man whose eyes he had poked out, displaying his strength with that act, and lightly placed his other fist on the deceased man's chest. He squeezed that fist slightly. Thunk. A solitary needle shot from the launcher of that arm and stabbed into the shinobi's chest. Pulling the fist back and propping the man up by his eyes, Blue wedged his foot on the ninja's stomach and gave a hard push, shoving him into a readily raised rock wall. Past experience acquired from the fight told the shinobi that the Blue One was knowledgeable about chakra. He had controlled a dead kunoiki and hijacked her water jutsu in the last second, and the chain of hand seals were slashed to almost nothing for him. The eyeless man thumped lifelessly against the wall, falling in a heap on the ground. The needle in his chest oozed blood and his go-red-out eyes wept in the subtle throes of death. The diversion worked. Their wall, and their attention, was facing the wrong direction. From the long-forgotten umbrella pierced in the ground somewhere in the background, a shadow-swaddled bird bloomed forth, gaining a more defined physical form. It looked like a normal, midnight black crow, though with a clayey brown beak and beady black eyes. It coolly perched itself on the head of an unknowing Chunin, startling the man, and keenly furrowed its brown beak in its wings, revealing a pair of mouths hidden in their feathery depths. The shinobi behind the wall slowly, fearfully, turned and looked up at Crow Daidara. The bird seemed taken aback by the attention, then it spread its wings and the wing mouths chewed at something they could only dreadfully hope wasn't what they were thinking. It was. Caw. It squawked in indignation and its master spoke firmly. Katsu. The explosion was strong enough to stall the rain for 1 full minute, wiping out the cluster of shinobi bolstering on that side, bolstering themselves up to die for their village, as well as 100 extra meters of blazing destruction. Buildings collapsed, melted and pushed back by the mushroom cloud rising up into the cloudy sky, falling onto ninjas taking shelter inside and crushing them without mercy. The shockwave loosened the earth, casting away anyone nearby into open fissures in the ground, swallowing them whole, and for those that weren't lucky enough to be granted the relatively swift death of being eaten by the battered earth were slammed into the twisted, metallic remains skyscrapers and iron structures, pierced clean through or fractured beyond human comprehension. A little bit away from the blast, Blue shaded his blind eyes from the dust and debris, fixing his feet to the floor with chakra and weathering the heated, earth-rumbling storm. The underground bunkers and bomb shelters were put to the test. Some collapsed, killing their occupants. Others were just barely in one piece. The protection units for civilians and Genin further from the location were spared the devastation, though the immortal scar of watching that section of the village depress would stay with them forever. Am's administrative building swayed treacherously amid the tremors, even as it wasn't in the direction of where the bomb had gone off. The shaking subsided a little, but the fires burned bright, damped bit by the returning rain. Blue looked to the boy that had tagged him and his brow twitched with irritation as he saw a medic carry him in her arms, leaping to safety so she could heal him. They prayed for salvation. They prayed for help. They prayed to Nagato. The whimpering tears of the village, near and far, was music to Blue's ears. Devastation. Mayhem. Death. Screams of the damned echoed in the din of the blast, vibrating despite the smaller explosions of gas lines inside buildings. Medics, some of the last remaining able-bodied ninjas in raced to pick whoever could still be saved, often coming upon a body rend past the point of redemption and stubbornly slinging them in their arms, hopping far from the monster that had brought such damnation to their quiet village. Most medical ninjas hefted more than 3 of the dying comrades in their arms, the victims mostly expiring in the medic's safe hold or weeping to be left to perish, begging the healers to save their strength for someone that could be saved. Not many could be saved. Blue wasn't going to bother entering the Amekkage Tower to fetch Nagato. That god was going to come to him. Sooner or later, the god will come. He faced where the pair had gone, intending to set ablaze bomb shelters that had survived Crow Daidara's bomb. Blue then stilled. The blue sniper's temple creased and his lips turned down. Curious. The dying god finally heard the prayers of his people. The entrance of the tower blew open with a resounding thud and a deep voice bellowed from within. That is enough. The ground under Naruto's feet broke apart and a brown snake with a diamond-shaped head shot out, biting down on the man and continuing its ascent into the heavens. Blue huffed and opened his arms, ripping the poisonous snake in half about 10 miles from the earth. He had formerly been a snake summoner, so venom scarcely worked on him, though the 2 puncture holes in his chest prickled irksomely. He whirled around, high in the sky, and 2 metal fists cracked into his skull, one smashing into the bridge of his nose and the other meeting the corner of his jaw, casting him high. The blow jarred him violently, jostling his senses. Blue broke out through the clouds of opening a hole in the chakra constructs and rocketing to space. If he had sight, he would have admired the starless, moonless midnight sky. The Asura path fell with a shuddering thud. Nagato himself came out of the double doors of the tower, shirtless and clad only in a pair of black shinobi pants with a pair of blue ninja sandals on his feet. His back was devoid of a majority of his black chakra rods and his thin, stringy red hair matted down to his head from the downpour, covering his right eye with a deep bang. His breathing was rattling, standing lean enough for his ribs to be showing though now he wasn't hunched forward. Nagato spared a look around at the destruction, his expression was grim. His paths swept out of the building and lined at his back, joining the Asura paths. Now wasn't the time to admire the godly cage, was the unspoken utterance of the Preta path as he swept his arm over the altered landscape. The medics made short work of retrieving their comrades and salvaging what remained of the rest. Meanwhile, the Uzumaki faced his eyes up and the still ascending form of the blue Uchiha, hidden behind the cloud, but the man could very well still see and detect his pitiless opponent. The Rinnegan of the dying god glowed maliciously and an outstretched hand stretched up to the booming heavens. Come, blue Uchiha. The ground thudded under the pressure of his chakra, forming a shallow depression that spiderwebbed outwards to his paths behind him and the dead bodies of his shinobi all around. Mighty chakra gathered in the pit of his gut, surging up his torso and spreading throughout his body, rejuvenating his frail form and adding several layers of foreboding to his next words. Universal pull. In his ascension and peaking at the lower parts of the mesosphere, Blue stopped with a startling jolt, then he bolted down to the earth. Fire ignited over his body, pulled in faster and faster, until Nagato circled a hand around his neck and followed the path of the blue Uchiha's descent straight into the ground, delivering a heavenly choke slam. The impact of Blue hitting the earth leveled a quarter of hidden rain. The dying god against the embodiment of death. There's more to this fight that meets the eyes. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.